Evening, people. How are we all doing?
Hey!
Is he here? It just we weren't here a minute ago, Evo, man. Like literally seconds ago, and now he is.
Ta-da!
That was rapid. So you've been skiving for the past few weeks, buddy. What's where you been at? What's been happening?
Oh wow, yeah, it was quite a busy couple of weeks. First of all, starting in the Middle East 2 weeks ago, had some fun there. Videos will be soon on the channel, of course. And
Nice.
Last weekend I was in the UK. I was a guest at Koi Wholesale, UK. Most of you know that also Keith died recently. So also one of the reasons for me to visit the shop and talk about, of course, about Keith and the business with the guys there. And so yeah, it was good to visit London also for the first time. So it was nice.
Yeah, nice. Jolly good. And how's everybody else doing?
Yeah,
Good.
How's your day been, Chris? Obviously, you had a bit of a rough weekend, didn't you?
Yeah, let's not go into that, mate. But yeah, I never thought there'd be this amount of admin in the koi industry. I think it's something that everyone's numb to. But yeah, it's been a proper boring day today, mate.
So all these creative ideas I come up with, mate.
Yeah, something like that, mate.
What about you, Joe?
Yeah, good. It's been a bit of a crazy week as well this week, but yeah, really enjoying it. So got some exciting stuff coming up for the magazine, so I'm excited about that.
Nice. And you, Lee?
Oh, yeah. I'm good. Just rocking a bit of a headache. I got a headache that would kill a shabumpkin at the moment. I think I got a cold coming, but I'll survive. And the show must go on.
Fair play. What about you, Krafty?
Yeah, I'm all good, mate. All good.
Happy days. So, has anybody had anything interesting happening since we were last on?
Well, I wasn't there, so maybe you guys can give me some kind of summary. No.
No, fair play. Right, anyway, so a few bits for you all, folks. First of all, before we get into this evening's topic, which was one prompted by Evo, to be honest. So we are going to be discussing all things koi food this evening, which I think is a topic everyone likes to delve into. Very nice mug there, buddy. Absolutely loving that.
It's not free though, is it?
Absolutely not, never. So all things koi food. If there's any bits you'd like us to add into the conversation, folks, please pop it in the comments, and we'll throw it into the mix. Also got a bit of koi appreciation for us tonight, guys, or should I say Hiyotsori appreciation. So and that's not just admiring our handiwork on the camera. For epic pieces. So I was doing the very last selection on my Hiyotsoris the other day, and I've got now my last 8 fish, which I'll be growing on for another year. So not too bad. 8 fish out of 1,000. Thereabouts.
It gives a bit of perspective though, mate, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And just a couple of mag bits just to fill everyone in on while you're watching. We've just got one kind of notice which we're a bit annoyed about. So issue 23 that's supposed to be coming out early next month. There will be a slight delay with it. We've had an issue with our printers with cost rises. So it's left us kind of scrambling to find an alternate, which has caused a few delays just in order to keep everything in check, folks, because where we were standing, it was going to hit us really, really hard in the pocket. So we've got round it, but we've just lost a little bit of time in between. So just want to give everybody the heads up on that one. And for the issue 24 after that, with normal service resumed. But well worth the wait. The Nagami interview coming up, folks, in issue 23. I cannot wait for you to see that. Not very often I get goosebumps from reading something like that. But even with the amount of time I've spent there, that was absolutely epic. So I'm sure everyone's going to love it. And yesterday, Rie, our team member in Japan, was actually sat down with the big boss man at Marido, Hisashi Hirasawa. So I think it was a long kind of 30 question script we sent to her. And yeah, I asked some pretty inquisitive stuff, so I can't wait to get that translated and back to sit down and have a read of. But yeah, dead excited for this Japan angle coming to the mag. And then very last one, legacy issues. You might have seen it. So anybody after a copy of issue 1 who hasn't got it in their collection, I think it's about 8 p.m. They'll be available on the Koi Talk website to buy. We sent a notification out about these, but the legacy issues are charged at a slightly higher cost because we're doing very limited print runs on them, which cost us a lot more, but still pretty competitive at $6.95. So if you need issue 1 to finish your collection, I know it's been tripping out some OCDs massively. Get yourself over there and get one ordered. But yeah, other than that, guys, we'll get stuck into it, now I've got that bit out of the way. So, Evo, what was your thoughts on this topic for tonight?
Well, I think it's quite an interesting season. Well, not season, period of the year. Season is about to start. And most of the questions I get at the moment is like, when do I start feeding again? And also talking about brands. So maybe it's good to tell a bit more about the brands, for example, that breeders are using in Japan, because there are some misconceptions about that, in my opinion. So that's a good topic to talk about. And maybe it's good to just, I mean, every pond is different, temperatures as well, fish are different. So maybe it's good to share some personal experiences here in today's live stream.
Yeah, we'll go with, I think, the bit then, obviously, yeah, sort of reintroducing food at this time of year. Chris, where was you at with this, mate? Where did you used to steer people back in the shop days?
My mantra in general is steady Eddie when it comes to koi in general. I don't like big changes. That's my mantra with koi keeping, whether it be temperature, food, any adjustments. Slow and steady wins the race for me. So I'll always be, certainly going into winter, I'm more concerned. Coming out of winter, I'm not a big fan of people that just stop feeding completely. I mean, you've got fish that are quite happily feeding down to sort of low temperatures, and when they're moving around, they're burning energy, and if you don't feed them, they get into deficit. And then obviously at that point, it weakens their ability to combat problems when the temperature starts warming up. So yeah, slow and steady for me. And obviously the key for me is feeding the right foods at the right temperatures, which probably leads on to another part of it. But yeah.
Cool. Lee, as a hobbyist, your perspective, where have you gone with this? What's sort of been what you've had drummed into you? I know, or are you keeping warmer all the time? That's obviously a point here. We've got the heated, unheated kind of debate to it.
Yeah. So because I've recently built a bigger pond and moved the fish across during the winter period in like December, I think it was, I've decided to keep my pond heated just to give the fish the best chance with the immune system. So I've tried to mimic summer temperatures, put them across. So I haven't come off the food at all. They're still on, growth and color at the moment. So all I'm doing at the moment is actually slowly building up the feed, ready to try to, maximize the feed-in period when the temperatures really start booming. So it's not really affected me this year, to be honest.
No, fair play.
Apart
Joe,
from the wallet.
Joe, you're obviously newer into it, so more not what necessarily you're doing, but what were the things you were being fed and being told when you was coming into this? Because I think that'll help give us some perspective on maybe advice that's out there.
Well, I don't know if there was. I mean, to be honest, I think when you're really early in the hobby, mainly a lot of what you look at is like branding of the koi foods as well, and I think do hobbyists even look at the difference in quality from the real low stuff and the higher stuff? And
just minutes specifically on kind of feeding regime, certainly coming in out of winter into spring. Have you ever had a period with the pond unheated?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I just didn't feed all through winter. I just stopped feeding altogether.
Yeah.
That was kind of the advice that I was, I suppose, on the internet, is just like feed them when they're active and up for it. So not anything about like the quantities I was feeding. So yeah, nothing really there.
No, fair play. What about you, Krafty?
Yeah, very much on the same sort of level as what Chris was saying. It was more watching pond temperatures as we come through into spring, and then little and often, but doing a few more water tests just to make sure that you're waking up your media along the way as well, so you're not overfeeding and creating yourself any issues as you go. But it's one of those, some people just go bang into it, but I get a lot of people come through the shop, asking, is it all right to start feeding now? And, this is, for me, one of the bad times, because tonight, for instance, we're going down to down to 5 degrees again. So the waters are going to take a big dip again. So you really got to sort of watch your temperatures as much as what you do the volume that you're putting in your pond as well, to be honest.
Yeah. What's your thoughts on this one, Evo?
Well, first of all, I agree on all certain points. I'm always doubting about feeding the fish in the wintertime, especially when it's like really, really cold. Temperatures drop below 6 or 8 degrees Celsius. I would skip the feeding. But on the other hand, I think I'm a big fan of seasonal feeding. And the reason why is because when you look at nature, of course, they have their natural seasonal pattern as well. And I think one of the most important periods to feed your fish is actually the autumn, preparing the fish again for the winter period. So I get a lot of questions, and people who have koi pond and do get problems, unfortunately, they get those problems in springtime because they start feeding. The biological filter is not active or as active as it should be during the rest of the season. So most of the hobbyists get their problems in spring because they start too quickly. And one of those things is what Krafty already said, is the temperatures difference between day and night. That's a big difference. We had some nights here 1-2 degrees Celsius last week, and then today it felt like 18 degrees and everyone was sitting out in the sun. So those fluctuations in the temperature is something you really have to pay attention to. So getting back to the autumn, I think it's really important to prepare your fish for the winter. And of course, what Chris said, you could feed your fish throughout December till temperatures like really dropping to freezing levels. But then I personally would stop feeding the koi and start, well, probably around now. I mean, springtime here in Europe is very late this year. So of course, it depends if you're heating your pond. Is your pond fully in the sun in your garden? Doesn't have a lot of shadows? So there are a lot of different things to take into account. But I think it's quite an interesting subject. And then we're not even talking about the composition of koi food, the quality ingredients, what koi food should I use, and what koi food are breeders using.
I've got these bits sketched down, but I think just while we're on this topic, for me, it's like when people ask me about stocking levels, the one I keep coming back to is it's not how many fish you put in the pond, it's how much you feed the fish. That's what you base your filtration on, and feeding in an unheated pond, because ultimately that's what we're really talking about now, is all coming down to your water temperature, like it's been said. And it's how active your filter is at those given temperatures, because your fish you can be freezing cold, have a sunny day, the fish react to the sunlight, and all of a sudden they're up on the top looking for food, and everyone gets carried away throwing the food in when your water's still really cool and your filter's completely asleep. Next thing you know, that food's not been processed, you've got an ammonia spike and your fish look like shit and you're struggling to deal with it because your filter just won't catch up at any kind of pace. That's really what you are completely governed by this time of year. So even now, waking up completely with Chris on the steady Eddie bit, just slowly and measuring. It's a good idea to keep a measure for the food, because when I'm building a pond up in summer, Lee, you'll have this at the minute as well with your feeder, it's incremental gains. So I'll set the feeder at say 10 seconds of feed and leave it there for at least a week, 2 weeks to let the filter system adapt to that 10 seconds. And when I add an increase, it's gradual. So I'll add it by 2 seconds. So if you've not got that capability, if you've got just a little scoop, a little medicine cup that you're feeding two of them per feed, for example, you keep that consistent to allow your filter to build up to that level, rather than not knowing. And one day you've fed them a handful, next day you've fed them 3. and it's just causing complete chaos. So yeah, steady Eddie, bit of control, and away we go. And on diet, so type of diet, and you guys feel free to intersect when I've said this bit. I've had somebody from the States asking me about wheat Germans sort of sake multi-season and bits today, and he was not wanting to go to sake multi-season because he was too concerned about the protein level. Now, I for one, I rarely look at protein levels in a food. In a winter food, especially, the main thing I look at is the fat concentration, because fat has a certain melting point, and it'll get to a level in your pond where that's going to go into the fish, and then it's just going to sit there. It's not going to be digested properly. So that's the main thing I look at. And when we do talk about protein, the only thing I do concern about, this is going to tie into a bit later, is what's the source of the protein, because this is an absolute one where everybody is getting deceived in a lot of places. Because for me, I know there's conversations to be had around insect meal, which Joe, you'll probably like to get stuck into. But as we know it right now, fish meal, and the best quality fish meal, is the best protein source for our koi. So that's where we're at. We've got to watch, other foods out there, cheaper foods that might use poultry meal, for example, that fish can't do a lot with. So anybody got anything to add on that point?
Well, sorry,
Joe.
No, you go ahead.
Well, I've written quite a bit about this topic, so yeah, might as well throw a little bit of nerdiness in the mix. So,
Come on, Chris. I always like listening to the
waffle.
By the way, am I the only one without a Koi Talk mug? I see everyone drinking out of his Koi Talk mug. Where's mine?
Evo, I haven't got one.
Oh.
Evo, $9.95, available at koitalk.com.
Yeah, shipping.
I will buy one.
£30 though, I think.
Sorry for interrupting you, Chris.
No, that's all right, mate. I think composition of the food. I mean, the go-to. It's been drilled into hobbyists for years. When I used to work in the trades, face-to-face side of things, first thing people would do is look at the size of the bag and the percentage of protein, and that's how they judge the value and the quality of the food, which obviously is a complete misconception. We've done sort of just basic analysis of going, well, look at this bag that has a volumetric size of sort of 50 litres, but the weight is a fraction of what the higher quality feed is, for example. So it's all from a commercial perspective. It is unfortunate because I think hobbyists do get led down the wrong path, and it's no surprise that higher quality ingredients comes with a higher price point, but it's relative. That is the thing to keep in mind, because if you're looking at growing your fish, for example, this is just one variable feeding your food. You could be talking about pigment, could be talking about skin quality, you could be talking about vitality, health, the quality of the water, the byproduct, etc. But if we just look at growth as one variable, 1 point, if you're feeding 2-3 times the amount of that shitter, cheaper food to achieve the same results that you would do feeding a better quality food and putting less pollutants in your water, when you spell it out like that, it's a no-brainer. It's a complete no-brainer. Your water quality is going to be in better check. You're going to have physically less waste in the pond. This is like this symbiotic relationship. There's always a knock-on effect for what you put in the pond. And the most expensive content in the feed is the white fish meal. My only sort of comment on it is I do hope that one day, from an ethical and a sustainability point of view, that we do crack this sort of connection between getting results and making it a bit more sustainable. Because being a bit of a conservationist at heart, I think we're all it's easy to turn a blind eye to the fish meal side of things because it generates such great results. But I think ultimately it needs more research. I'm just not sure if it's going to get it in this industry. That would be my only concern.
Yeah, I think so. So, Lee, what's
the
story?
sorry, there are actually some researches done by universities here in the Netherlands, and I didn't read them like in very depth, and I was very informed by Mike from ProBites. He unfortunately passed away last year, but he really understood what was going on, what the fish needed in which time of the year, and you can of course really compare that again with nature. And so there are some researches done on it, even though, yeah, it's probably in Dutch, so it wouldn't be spread out there. But
sorry to interrupt, Ivo. So the logic behind the poultry meal, for example, is because it mimics the amino chains that carp can break down. But the reality of it is completely different. The science behind it, and then the reality, the results are just parallel. You know,
don't mimic body temperatures for a start, does it?
Well, this is it. There's variables that are going to play a big part in it. So yeah,
crazy.
It's a difficult topic.
Yeah.
Lee, hobbyist perspective on this one. So you're out there looking for a koi food to use. What steered you in the paths you've gone down? Because it's I know it's a scary place. There's so much choice out there for you when you're looking.
Yeah.
How do you filter through the shit?
Yeah, so exactly what Joe was saying. I think when you first get into the hobby, I know quite a lot about human diets and nutrition. So I know there's obviously good foods and bad foods. You know, obviously the digestive tract of a koi is totally different to us, but I know the fundamental principles of a good food and a bad food. So as soon as I started to get decent koi, I researched as much as I could to find the right product. And like Joe was saying, you get drawn in straight away to the pretty packages. But I delved in deeper and I did try to research what people in Japan were using, what high-end hobbyists was using, and I came to the conclusion that sake kari was the stuff to use. So it did blow my mind a little bit, the price of the small two kilo sacks?
Yes.
You know, I was like that, Jesus. And then I was putting in big sacks, and then they were sort of like coming in this like brown paper. And I was thinking to myself, is that the same stuff? Because I was like, it's the same name, it's the same product, but why is it a different sack? So, you know, it took me a little while to realize, obviously, that's like an industrial size. So that's when I started to use that. And I haven't gone back, really, to be honest. But what Joe's saying is, it is quite mind-blowing. You do look at pretty packages to start with until you realize, actually, it doesn't. You need the main product that's in that sack, and you need to get the best stuff.
Yeah,
and that is the best stuff, isn't it? You know, so
I'm not going to mention the brand. I don't know if it's still out there, but I remember once being presented Niigata Professional, and I know the shit had never been anywhere Niigata. So it's all them kind of ploys that, unfortunately.
I think it had a picture of the mountains on the front, though, mate.
Yeah.
What about you, Krafty? Where are you at with all this?
So where I was before, obviously, where I am now is I started to look at the brands on the koi market rather than what the food was. So one food that I moved to that I found that was relatively affordable to me at the time was, it's just got out of my mind now, NT Labs do it.
Medikoi.
Medikoi. So all the Medikoi range. And that's when I then started to go in and start looking at all the ingredients, etc. But Medikoi, for me, I had some quite decent results, but going on from junior and then into stable with colour, etc., which obviously I now know are some of them little tricky nutrients they put in there to make you feel that you're getting even more bang for your buck, etc. But you know, as a food, it done a decent enough job, and it wasn't costing a bomb against some of the, let's say, sticks that you can buy in various colour forms, etc. That your nan buys because it's good value. But yeah, I wasn't necessarily pulled to packaging. I was more pulled towards the people that said they do a lot in the koi world, and that's what pulled me in. But then again, as you grow into your hobby, you then start looking further and further into it. And you know, it goes without saying that the Sake Akari, which has a very good article in the latest Koi Talk magazine, by the way, Rick, that you wrote, well done, which is something that you all move to if you've got the cash. But yesterday I started to record down all of the fish brands that we stock, all the weights, all the prices, and I am in the process of doing a conversion price per unit, so to speak, so we can actually see what the values are, and I'll share that once I've done all of the formulations.
Yeah, that's the baby, that one, isn't it? What about you, Joe? How did you decide to go with whatever you went with as your first food, and have you changed since?
Yeah, my first food, I think I was pretty much same as everyone. I've got a big tub of that Tetra pond sticks, and then I use the tub as a bowl for measuring fish in as well.
That's probably all it's good for, mate, to be honest. The
tub. To be fair, my perception changed on it when I worked for a pet food manufacturer, and I kind of got that job, and then also been involved in koi. It was a bit bizarre. So a lot of the koi foods in the UK that you'll see, and a lot of retailers will stock, they were all made by one very similar company with a few little minor tweaks here and there. And we'd get brands approaching us, and we want to put more protein and fat in our growth food, for example. And I'm saying, all right, okay, well, it's going to be a 15% cost increase here. It's like, maybe we can just make the pellet look a little bit more red instead, and it can be, so the brands out there, they cannot afford to put more fish meal in because it's just too expensive, and it was too expensive for us to really buy it. And I think people would be surprised. And one of the reasons I think Ikari is so expensive is because of the quality and the quantity of the fish meal that goes in there. But I agree with you, Ricky, and I really do want to talk about insect meal because I think people will be surprised at what it can do. There's a scientist who I'm trying to connect with for the magazine at the minute, because I think people will be interested in, and he reckons that koi carp can digest insect protein something ridiculous like 18 times faster than fish protein, because it's natural and they can process it a lot quicker. But also it's 10 times more efficient on emissions basis to produce it for insect meal, because you're not getting a boat and going out to sea and catching it and then bringing it back, and then everything else. And I think it's just going to be really interesting to see also how you grow insects. Is you generally use the byproduct of food, so brewers' hops. The insects will feed on brewers' hops, and they grow it with leftover food and fruit and vegetable skins, that kind of stuff. The food that people aren't using, you use that to actually feed insects. So it's really sustainable.
It's a very, very interesting topic, mate. Before we go any further, what football team is that on that picture behind you?
For me, Leeds United.
How did they get on at the weekend?
I can't remember, to be fair. I think I've got a bit of Alzheimer's, so can't remember.
Well, the number's too big to process.
Yeah. I think your players had a bit of that as well, mate.
Anyway,
I just want to ask Joe a question quickly. Joe, like we were talking about grades of fish meal, as you've got a bit of understanding of it, I'm a bit uneducated on it. I'm guessing there's different grades of insect meal then, is there?
Yeah, so the main one is black soldier fly insect meal is this thing that everyone's been talking about at the minute, and it's I believe they culture it in Holland, and that's the one that everyone's talking about as being the next big thing, and it being like a really strong source of protein, and also being like able to use it in complete and sustainable foods. But for like dog foods, as an example, it needs to have the actual main source of protein needs to have like you've said, the right amino acid profile, but also, I think the one thing you're going to struggle with fish food is the insect meal protein. This is getting really complicated, but it doesn't have omega oil in it, so it's still going to need salmon oil to make it a complete food. But I think black soldier fly is the one that people are talking about.
So it's very interesting that you mentioned it, because I have spoken to a Dutch guy that has a big company somewhere in Asia, and he is really into this. And I can tell you, this is already far ahead what we even could imagine for the future for fish food, for the commercial market, but also for the koi carp. So I think we will see a lot of different things coming up in the next few years. So that's quite interesting. Something else that I really would like to mention is that for most of the hobbyists, because Krafty said it, it's like when you go into a shop and most of the people go for the fancy packages with, of course, they look at price and they look at the proteins. But we should keep in mind that, I don't know how it is in, for example, the UK, but this is my personal guess, that 80% of all koi food is almost the same as coming from one and the same factory.
And there's the real one that's the struggle for people, isn't it?
And yes, I'm not talking about the big brands like Saki Hikari, GPD. Those are different. That's koi food that's imported. But most of the koi food that we get here in the European market comes in one or two of the same factories, and you can see it on the codes at the back of the bag, which factory there. And I mean, that's fine. I mean, it's good to have different brands, and that's how it goes in every single industry, even in our own food industry, where you can get the same peanut butter from the same factory as well, but one has a different label. That's how it goes. But that is, I think that like the biggest part of the regular koi food market is coming from the same factory. So if you really want to make the difference, investing in a good diet food, like for example from one of the big brands, I think it will be eventually good for your fish, but also for your water quality.
The bit I'd say on that, before we jump into the next question, which is going to be this one, by the way, I know you want to talk about this, Ivo. So, but yeah, for me, while you're on that one, I think from a consumer perspective, what you can do, and this is how I've always looked at foods when they've come to me, I've tried to research into the history of the brand to see what, for a start, any of the major brand food manufacturers I can think of will either have all the sort of research behind their recipe, which they will want to market, or at the real big brand level, they will have their own manufacturing and research centers. You know, we look at Hikari in Japan, several factories, R&D centers, you know, fish farms that they're actually actively producing fish on in order to study their diets. That's where all this comes from. It's their own stuff. If I'm right, Takazumi was one that was their own recipe and research developed. I'm not sure if they manufacture in-house. I'm not privy to that, but I know it's their own stuff. Whereas you get into the realms of, and Coppens, I'm going to mention Coppens as another, because I've said this before. Before Saki, I was using Coppens and was very, very happy with it, because again, I used that same approach. I looked at what they've got as R&D. They were doing all that themselves. To me, it made sense. You know, the price was more competitive because there was no brand in the middle of it, adding on tax or anything like that. It was their product straight out there. Where I get annoyed is they changed the protein source to one that I'm not happy with. The food changed, the results changed, it got scrapped. But before that, it was pretty awesome. And that's obviously one of the brands there where you find that same diet repackaged up under various different names out there in the market, especially in the UK. And it's same shit, different day with that one. But leading on to it, guys, Ivo, I'll let you run with this one first. Very interested to find out what the Japanese are using. What's your take on this one? I'm interested to know.
Yeah, it's a really good one, because what I always did, maybe most of the people knew it, I had a koi food web shop in the Netherlands since 2012 till 2018, almost 6 years. That's how I entered the whole industry. So the first thing that I always did when I enter at a greenhouse at the koi breeder is, what are they feeding? Because when you enter, you have those big gray or brown bags that Lee has on his desk at the entrance of every single greenhouse. And I was wondering, so first of all, how much does a breeder feed every single season? And that has to do with how big is the farm, how much fish do they have, how much tozai are they growing. So it's really interesting to do some calculations on that stuff. And I think you, Ricky, probably know it from NND. You have maybe some numbers from them. But in my perspective, when I was starting with this within our industry, it was like, oh, probably all the breeders are using sake hikari. But in reality, it's different. Of course, there are some breeders that use sake hikari all year long, and maybe on their main ponds, but most of the time they're using sister brands, also from sake hikari or other brands that they can buy in Japan. Because you should imagine that a koi breeder feeds 20 ton a year, or maybe I don't know, pallets of koi food. If they have to pay the price that we pay for the big brands here in Europe, they will be going bankrupt. So of course they're using good koi food, but they're not using on all their ponds the big brands. Yes, maybe on their champion ponds and on their high quality fish, that it's really worth to give them the expensive koi food. But this is just my personal experience and my personal opinion. And I do know that there are exceptions out there in Japan. So I really want to mention that before people get angry. But most of the breeders, they're not using hype brands all year long. But that's my experience.
Cool. Lee, I'm curious to know what your perception, obviously you've been, I don't know if you went digging around in the food cupboards. I know you was probably digging around in a few.
Yeah. Like I said, I went over there with your brother, the agents and your brother was doing their thing, and I was snooping around with a camera and sniffing around everywhere. And Evo's bang on the button there, They don't just feed sake hikari. I think I went to about a dozen breeders over there, to be honest, in a week. It was amazing. And there was one or two who admitted all they use is sake. And I was like quite impressed, because obviously, it's going to hold a big price tag over there. Not as much as here, but it's still a big outlay. But again, then I'd go to another place and they'd have a pallet of sake and a pallet of other food. So, I wouldn't know what it was. It was all in Japanese. But yeah, some don't feed sake, some feed sake and a different brand, and some do just feed pure sake. But then again, I don't know what they would be using in the mud ponds. Maybe they're only using this pure sake in their fish houses for their better graded, tozai or nisai. I'm not sure. But yeah, it's quite impressive with the different amounts of food that they would use,
Yeah. Krafty. So I'm interested to know your perception of what you thought would be going on, and ideally before you've heard all us lot waffle, your perception of what's possibly being done in Japan. I know you've not managed to see it firsthand yet.
Not yet, but that's in the pipeline. Perception, I mean, just looking, obviously, just because I haven't been there, don't mean to say I don't see what goes on over there, especially.
Yeah, and that's what I'm getting at.
With like Evo's. I recall one of Evo's videos actually where he pans across a car park where there was just like tons of food on crates outside with all the auto feeders and whatnot. And it's not something that I've actually considered what they feed, except for when they go through the spawning process and they go through the fry. And it was like I was more intrigued to see how they bring so many fry up to a certain level as they go through their cullings, and how they actually feed that, because fry that are millimeters big, how do they feed so many? And that's what got me. But it doesn't surprise me that not everyone feeds sake, because the market's huge. And with some of the the way that I would think would go on was, if you start to look at the likes of Dainichi, with the turnover his farm must produce, he must have fingers in pies for his own specific diets, etc. That's what you would think, because as in business, if I'm producing that amount of stock or livestock, there's potential there that you can actually start to create a subsidiary where you can bring that into your own sort of feeding regimes, etc. But if they don't, they don't. But it's certainly something that I would expect to happen.
Yeah. So here's my take on this from what I've seen over the years, and I'm with Yivo and Lee to a degree, because obviously I come at this from a commercial background as well. Obviously, having made the choice to use sake hikari, which is a huge investment for the company, but it really sort of angled at what level of fish that they are raising, because it is a cost, it is a business overhead. And there's not many of the bigger breeders that I see these days that aren't now using sake hikari. If I dial back maybe 10 to 15 years, it was scarce, but I'm not sure people were completely convinced by it at that point. Now they are, and like I say, you go to Dainichi, all the big guys, N&D use it a lot, Omasako, all them kind of guys at that level that are raising, super high-end fish. Are investing in it. They know the benefits. There's other breeders I've spoke to in the past that I remember one. I'm not going to say who it was, but he's always made me laugh. But his fish one year were just, the body shapes were terrible. There were varieties that are known to be a bit, gut heavy anyway. But this particular year was a train wreck. And he says, yeah, I was feeding really good food last year and I changed it, to something else. And all of a sudden they're all swimming around like rugby balls. So it's really, really split. Well, it is a commercial incentive for them. A lot of those breeders out there aren't really raising fish to any level. They produce a crop. The price of that crop has been the same for as long as I've been visiting Japan. It's not moved. Yet every other cost around them changes, goes up, and they still, Crystal even, they keep the same price. You go back every year, you get the Tosai mix, and right, how much are these? Yeah, it's same as last year. It just never moves, but everything stays fixed for them. They have the bit of food they're using. There's no real, I wouldn't even call it raising, really. It's just some of them go to the mud pond. They keep them ticking over, let nature do its part to a degree, and see where they end up. But what Krafty sort of mentioned about bringing Dainichi in and the bigger breeders, that gets interesting, because those guys are lucky that they've got a manufacturer like Kirin, who is the manufacturer behind Hikari, and these big guys will often get the likes of Kirin sat in their office and actually having particular diets tailored to their specific needs. That's when them guys really hit the jackpot. So I know Sakai has a great relationship with Kirin, and they manufacture specific diets for them. I know one was a wheat germ-based growth food, for example, which blew my mind when I saw it, because there's loads of things about wheat germ I don't like and a couple I do like. And it's like they took the couple that they did like and fused it with the magic of what they've got in Saki growth, for example, and boom, away we go. So them guys have that got element, but they don't always get released to market for sale either. So yeah, it's a fascinating world when they get out there, isn't it, Evo? And Chris, Lee especially, it really is, for me, where I'm at in koi keeping, the simplicity of it. You will not go out there and find heaps of products that we're all getting sold, working in fish houses and places like that, because they don't need it and they don't particularly care about it. It's an interesting one. So before we move on, the last bit, I just want a bit of warning, and you guys will all appreciate this. One thing you do have to watch the Japanese for is their marketing strategies around food brands and some products, because what they tend to love is some guy walking in there with a big billboard or a flag, pinning it up in the fish house, or standing there with their arm around him like they've just committed to a multi-million-pound deal with this guy to use this product exclusively. They are absolute fuckers for that. I'm not going to lie. So, just when you do see that, take it with a pinch of salt, guys. Honestly,
perfect scenario there is when I went to Yamaguchi, JPD everywhere, and then bags of sake underneath his table.
That's the one. It's magical stuff. So be careful on that one, guys. Right, how long? Christ, 45 minutes we've chewed up there. We are going to go to your questions, but I think just before that, Should we have a look at a few here? Sorry. See your guys' take on this one. So I'm going to start. Well, I've got 3 pictures here. Let's start with number 3 anyway. There we go. So I think this was about 47 cm female. What do we think to that, guys? Everyone can still hear you.
Yeah, it's all right.
Cheers, Chris. So yeah, this I'm just absolutely buzzing for these. Super happy. Number 3 or number 2, should I say? This what me and Chris were having quite a conversation about this one actually, because it's kind of just crept up to some extent. I think this is going to have a really strong year and come into its own next season.
Wow.
What do you think, Evo? How are they looking since you last saw them?
Yeah, still amazing. I like the first one as well because it has the nice black. It's good divided on the head, and yeah, both are very clean. If you look at the Benny, of course, you can roughly find any black spot on it. Body wise, great shape, especially this one. I like it. Nice black fins, really good one.
Yeah, powerhouse. So as we move on to the top one here, I think we'll get everyone's opinion on this one. So this is my absolute number 1 from that entire batch. It's a whopping 52 cm Nisai and female. So Krafty, what we're thinking to that one?
That's just average, mate. That.
Yeah, I thought as much.
Mate, it's a banger, isn't it? I mean, to be fair, who took the photo? Was it you or Joe?
That was my picture as well.
No way, mate. I'm not having it. Yeah. Body on that is mint, isn't it? And the transition from like head into the shoulders, etc. For me, it's just seamless, isn't it?
It's crazy good body there. What do we reckon, Lee? Could that grace a pond down in Wales?
Oh yeah, that would definitely be the best tiered Surrey on my street, I reckon. Yeah, it's really nice, and obviously these are Shinoda, aren't they? But
yes.
Yeah, he feeds Saki, funny enough. I was talking to him. It's very impressive, but not as nice. The peduncle's not as strong as his bull, I'll be honest with you. But yeah, that is a really nice koi. Yeah, very nice indeed.
Mega.
Yeah.
Joe, what do we reckon?
Yeah, it's amazing. I think with here Surrey, usually it's difficult to stop them being quite spotty. But yeah, I think the main thing is when you see these in person and they swim past and it looks like molten lava. When you see a few of them, it's just unbelievable. Yeah, the Benny's phenomenal.
What do you reckon, Evo? You've seen the farm itself. As would this one make it through in his Nisai Tatigoi? Would beat the breeder with this one?
I think it would even be sold out before I even have the chance to watch for it. Yeah, of course, these are the higher quality fish. I mean, that's so true. So those will be popular. Probably how they sell their fish these days is by auction or by how do you call it in English? Like they give you a straw and then you can pick first or second or third. It's always fun to see your lucky draw. That's the one. It's always fun to see how much people are joining those events. And nowadays, I think that's after Corona, you see a lot of breeders and Shinoda is very good at it. Like inviting a lot of people at a certain time, probably just after lunch when everyone has a full stomach, is happy again, and not hungry anymore. They invite them to their koi house, to the greenhouse, and then it's packed with people, and everyone wants them. And people are staying there from 1 to 5 to get to pick out one, and it's always a challenge to get the best one, of course. But sometimes really interesting to see other dealers pick koi as well. And a fish always looks different when you put it in a bowl. So it's a really nice game. And for the people that are having the dream to go to Japan, you should definitely go there and try to experience that, because we try to show it as much as possible on the footage and on the videos. But when you're there in real life, you would experience a whole different it will be a whole different experience. That's how I should add my sentence.
Yeah. So, Chris, before we get all our pretty faces back on the screen, you're going to give us the technical rundown on this one?
Yeah, I mean, it pains me to say it, but I do have to give you a pat on the back for this one, mate. I must admit. Yeah, super technical fish. That Ichimatsu checkered style, Surimono sort of style pattern. Yeah, very textbook pattern, body spot on, nice fin placement, nice strong sumi in the fins, contrast in the colour as well. I mean, obviously having the pleasure of seeing these daily, it's, you know, people say Suri is nothing without good Shiroji, or as true of that with Hiyatsuri, without that glowing red pigment, then it's just not the same fish. And it is an exceptional fish. And I've said to you quite a few times before when we're grading fish and going through them, I'm scratching my head looking for the flaws, because I'm thinking how these got through, because this is genuine quality. I would question anyone to really pick holes in that fish. So just awesome fish, great example, and it's been great watching this batch develop.
Absolutely. So that's 52 cm up at the minute, up from 6 to 12 cm, weren't it, when they rocked up? So I'm pretty chuffed with that. And
what
really,
I like about it as well is I mean, don't get me wrong, I know that was from several hundred fish, but it just goes to show what can be achieved if you've got an eye. You know, these fish would have been, you know, reaching the market around Europe, around the world, because these were, you know, ready to sell. Breeder is not keeping these fish ready to sell. So this sort of standard can be achieved. So it's just, worth highlighting.
That is that toe-side dream personified there in that fish, and the battle of beat the breeder as well. So I'm targeting 52 cm at the minute. I'm targeting 65 with that one by the harvest, and hopefully at least kind of doubling the volume up on that one. So should be pretty cool. Right then, guys, just to finish, a few questions. I'm going to let you lot answer this one from experiences, because I'm obviously far too biased with it. So, hey guys, is sake that much of a better food? It's a wonder in this day and age that nobody has copied the recipe, which happens to every industry. That bit I will answer at the end, but let's go around. Let's start with Krafty.
It's the Michelin star of koi food that graces every shelf or every hobbyist pond, in my opinion. It can't be copied to achieve the same results that sake get, due to a patented germ that can't be put into any other food, which is where a lot of the goodness comes from in the sake range. So, you know, to me, if you can afford it, use it. If you can't, then, like I've advised lots of people, try and get round a group of people and try and put like a tenner in a pot, like you would if you're going down the pub, and buy yourself a couple of sacks that can see you through. Because if you can cut the cost by getting a volume rather than just your 2 kilogram bags in a oneer, then it's worth doing, especially if you're part of a koi club, etc. And I know that there are people out there that have done that already and also taken that advice on board. So if you can do it, get it. If you can't, then there is other on the market, but it's just not as good as sake.
Yeah, nice. Joe?
Well, I've not had it before, sake, but I'm trying it this year for the first time.
Okay.
I guess what I want is more people and more brands come out and tell us why we should choose their brand over sake, and hear the other side of the story, because obviously I've heard it from yourself, Ricky, and the reasons why. I kind of want to listen to some other opinions from some of these other brands that are out there, and kind of see what their take on it is. And be quite direct with that questioning, because like you say, I don't think there's anybody out there that's doing anything different. But I guess you can't make a bad fish a good fish with sake as well. So I know there's been fish that have won awards in the UK that have been fed solely on cheaper wheat germ-based foods. So I think sometimes, for instance, like if I fed my fish all sake, it doesn't mean I'm going to have a Hiyatsuri like Ricky had up a second ago. So, you know, I think Depends on how relative it is to your collection, I guess. Yeah.
Lee?
I've never really used anything else. I've used balance at lower temperatures, Saki Hikari, and I've used growth and color. So for the last 2.5 years, I personally have nothing to compare it to. But talking to all my mates, all my like quite high-end hobbyists and the likes of dealers and stuff, there is nothing else to use really at the moment. So I'm happy it's going to stay that way for the foreseeable future, I guess.
Yeah. What do you think to that one, Evo?
I'm going to drop a bombshell here.
Go on.
Well, I know some of the brands are not available around the whole world, but I just mentioned it 30 minutes ago. I'm a huge fan of ProBites. Still out there, luckily. This brand is custom made by Mike back in the days. With his own recipes. Well, it's a difficult word. You guys fill it in for me.
Recipe.
So recipe, that's the word. Sorry, guys. Sometimes it's hard to find the right English words. So I'm a big fan of ProBites. I do agree Saki Hikari is also a very good brand. But if you are able to test the food and just try different brands and see what's the best for your fish, what works the best for your water quality, etc. There's one more thing I just want to add, because I think it was you, Joe, that was talking about you want to hear brands explaining why you should choose their koi food. And I think that something we miss on koi shows and events the last few years is those brands should be there. They are relying too much on online marketing, where the other side of our industry should do more online marketing. Is like the bigger brands, for example, Saki Hikari, GPD. I think they should be the ones that have the big stands out there, and not the dealer selling the koi food because they just want to sell one or two different brands. But I really think that the big brands should be there with a booth. And I need to confess, Hikari is always at the Holland Koi Show. They have their own stand. They have 2 or 3 people out there informing people, so they're doing very well. But I think we need more brands out there, so we can get presentations. We can get we could be educated about what should I look for, what is important for my fish, which time of the year, which period. So I think that is something that could be a good option for big brands to be there, show your face.
Agreed. What do you reckon, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I think most other foods have sort of done the rounds as well, done a lot of growing projects over the years. I think every other food on the market is inferior in terms of quality and ingredients. That's not to say that other foods are no good, but if someone's asking me my humble opinion, what's the best food, they get the same answer, and they have done for the last 6-7 years. The only slight sting in the tail is obviously the price. It goes through a lot of hands. Obviously, we've got to import the food. It then needs to go through a wholesaler, then needs to go through a dealer, and then needs to go to the consumer. So I know behind closed doors, that's something that is a conversation within the industry that's scratched a lot of people's heads over the years. I think other than the price, but again, that is relative to the quality. That's the only thing that would put a lot of people off of it, to be honest with you. Other than that, I don't think there is any reason not to be taking it seriously, other than price point.
I think Joe's bit about coming forward. I've got an interesting little story from years back when I was working at the shop. So we'd got one of the greenhouses set up that we operate from today. It was off-site then. So I asked all the sales reps that were coming in, I says, look, we don't know which food to use. I also want to do a trial. I was working with the magazines at the time. I said, I want to do something and actually document our results. I'm taking pictures of all the fish before, after, blah, 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 etc. Would you provide some food? So Hikari, instantly, yep, we'll do it. Didn't even hesitate. That was great. I'm not going to mention the other brands. One more opted in and 3 others declined. And the reason, I know exactly the reason they declined. They knew what they were going up against.
Yeah.
And that's the reason. So it's crazy. It's a tough one. I get it. And even now, you know, this is a conversation we have internally a lot with everything that we're doing. We're surprised more brands aren't kind of coming forward. I know it's sort of nature of the industry, but it's sort of given everything I've done in mentioning the car. It's nothing to do with them, any incentives. There's nothing. It's to do with my personal experiences that I share in order to better educate people. And on that basis, you know, and all the time now, 2 years, I've had not one brand reach out, say, we'd like you to try our food. We think it could stand up.
Same, exactly the same.
I think, why would they not be completely at it, saying, look, you've got 60 ponds. I'm sure you can spare us one to try this food for a season. I've got nothing more to say, really, on that front. So, yeah, guys, if you are watching, pull your finger out your arses and let people know why they should be picking your food over everyone else's.
They're not going to give it to you. You're too honest.
Sorry, too many then.
So they're not going to give it to you. You're too honest.
That actually reminds me of another story when someone did do that years back. There was a pond I remember it had a pond full of asagi that I'd raised. They were looking absolutely great. And they said, look, please try this food. It's great. It's actually on the market at the moment under another brand, the same manufacturer's food under another brand in the UK. And I fed it for 2 weeks. And my God, I've never seen belly lines get trashed so quickly. On top of the phone, they phoned me up and the positive tone. Oh, how are you getting on with the food? I said, it's absolutely terrible. You should be ashamed of yourselves. And yeah, next thing I know, my name was shit in every other conversation mentioned by that company. So yeah, there we have it. Right, I've got one more question. I just had my eye on there, if you bear with me, folks. Sorry, I was going to say something then.
No, mate.
Right, let's take that one off.
We haven't spoken about silkworm. I'm quite interested to hear what people think of silkworm.
Yeah, where can I get it from?
Silkworm.
I hear that there's certain breeders that just grind up silkworm and feed it to fry. And I don't know whether you guys have got any knowledge on that, because I have none.
Yeah, Yivo, what do you know of this? Have you seen it much these days?
To be honest, same as Joe, I don't know the exact details of it. I sold it back in the days in on the website where the little buckets with the silkworms and or the little bags. I don't even remember it, but so it was ordered a lot by people. You even had the I don't know how you call it. It's when a butterfly is still in his
chrysalis.
Cocon? How do you say it?
Cocoon.
Cocoon.
As well.
Yeah, so even those are being sold, and they were really nice snacks for the koi. So they're probably full of high proteins. I don't know the exact stuff behind it, but to be honest, I really don't know. But if they're still being sold these days and being used by hobbyists, and they have good experiences.
Chris, can you give us some? You got any tech on this for us? Any of that waffle?
Not specific on that. It just reminded me of a little anecdote of when we went to Suna's place, and he was brewing up his own food. And you almost took his.
Tozawa.
That was it? Yeah, I thought
oh
that.
My
yeah,
God, you just reminded me. Wow.
And in a hastily retreat, Ricky almost drove into his fish house and took half of his property down with him.
Right, I can't. Yivo, did you ever get to Tozawa?
Not sure. No, I don't think so.
He's in Uonuma on the way to Kobayashi, the Shirotsuori breeder, this really old fish house. Now, this guy produced some insane Harawaki, Madirigoi, things like that. Proper, I think he was in his 80s at the time, but he was a bit sketchy regards health, to say the least. He'd kind of been shoved to the outer circles of the koi world. But yeah, he used to brew this fish food himself, and I'm not sure of the exact recipe, but I know there was a lot of stuff decaying in this pot. But somehow he managed to get quite a sweetness to it as well. So it kind of, the sweet element of it kind of drew you in. And then all of a sudden it just sucker punched you straight to the bottom of your stomach. And
it was like a sweet, sick sort of smell.
Go on, Lee.
Right, ask a question. This might sound stupid, but you're talking about someone making their own koi food. Now, I'm just looking at my deck and I've got my waste bin there. When in the summer, when I'm putting waste food in there, the maggots are insane.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's your advice on feeding live food? Would that introduce a bacteria into the pond, or do you see where I'm coming from? Normally they're always dried and processed, but what about live foods when we're talking about feeding koi?
We will put your address in the comments so people can send their maggots over to you this summer.
I don't
you can test it.
Maggots.
Brilliant. I think the live food, I'm getting not to expect. I know in aquariums, it used to be a big issue making sure it come from a good source.
Yeah, exactly.
In such a small volume, you'd add that liquid in and you could add a massive problem in there. I would imagine in a koi pond, probably not so much. But like you say, a lot of it's dried and processed anyway. And I'm a big fan of live food. On the silkworm pupae thing, I do love silkworm pupae is phenomenal. There's just so many issues with it. Freshness is a massive one. A really big problem we've got in it. And a lot of the packets, the minute they're opened, within kind of 2 or 3 days, the quality is deteriorated so quickly. So we've got that issue to it. There's then qualities and grades of silkworm, like you've always got with fish meal. And then I think the biggest thing, this is a super high protein, high fat. It's like pumping steroids into your koi. The big issue is the volume of mechanical waste that can come from silkworm can literally be too much for a lot of ponds to process. And you've got to be super warm. You need to be using this stuff 24, 25 degrees. Otherwise, it's just going to be too much for the body to handle as well. Krafty, you were shaking your head then like you got some experience there.
Yeah, mate. So the good old koi treats, it goes out the door, and I just know people pile it in. And from my own experience of getting the koi feeding from hand for it, it was me that got hooked more than the fish, if I'm honest. And when you actually see the amount of crap that comes out, because they don't necessarily digest it, or they spit half of it back out, and then when I was pump fed, it was just horrendous amount of waste that was going through, and talking, it's all right in small doses, so to speak. I think your filters will be able to handle that, but don't go handful after handful like I did. It was great fun, but it weren't so good for the water, etc. After
you can always try watermelon. I see a lot of people feeding their koi watermelons in the summertime. It's really sweet. I need to confess that I'm not sure if carp can find watermelons in nature, but
mine love lettuce. If I chuck a lettuce in there, it lasts for like half an hour. It's gone.
Yeah. No, I'm not against any of that kind of stuff. I think it's a nice bit of variation to add, but underpinned by a good complete diet that they're being fed as their sort of staple and their core. So nice one, guys. Interesting topic. I hope everybody's found that useful. I will apologize. It obviously takes us a while to get around the questions, because the whole point is I like to get some variation on the answer.
Nope.
That was Ricky.
He looks amazing, doesn't he, like that?
That's the office Wi-Fi, mate.
Legendary. So on that note, guys, thank you for joining me again. Thank you to everybody watching who's tuned in. And we'll be back next week. Well, there we go. Quick plug. That's very nice, mate.
Nice.
There we are.
So
there's 2 actually. Make sure you book this one off in your calendar.
Oh, nice. There we go, guys. That's it.
Doing my bit for the industry.
Good man. Well done, Lee. Well prepared, buddy.
You should have been naked, mate.
next time.
I don't want a copyright on my channel, please. Don't do it.
Brilliant. Right, there we go. Thanks, guys. And we'll catch you all next week.
Konnichiwa.